Was it good to be a princess in the Middle Ages? The answer is no back then. Women generally married between the ages of 12 and 18, for example. The King of France, Charles VI, arranged for his daughter Isabel to marry the English King Richard II when she was only 6 years old. By that time, Richard was already 28. Fortunately, he was a gentleman, and they maintained a platonic relationship. Until Isabel turned 12, however. For women in the Middle Ages, marriage often meant the approach of death due to the harsh realities of childbirth. The conditions for giving birth were extremely poor, and complications often lead to death. In the case of complicated deliveries, the only option was often a cesarean section, but it was impossible to stitch up the mother afterward. Therefore, such operations were usually only performed after the mother had died. One story tells of an Austrian princess who went into difficult labor, and the doctors resorted to a dangerous procedure known as symphysiotomy, in which part of the pelvic bone was cut to allow the baby to be born. All of this was done without anesthesia. Many women, including princesses, lost their lives young due to childbirth. No wonder people in the Middle Ages feared getting sick. Back then, doctors were often monks from monasteries, and their clients were the nobility. They didn't want their hands to get stained with blood, so they would have barbers assist with medical procedures. In the 5th century, Hippocrates suggested that constipation could be treated with enemas. By the time this practice made its way to medieval Europe, it had evolved into the belief that enemas could improve one's appearance, and barbers were the ones performing them. The French were particularly firm in their belief in this. King Louis XIII, for example, enjoyed almond milk enemas, receiving them as many as 200 times a year. Louis XIV preferred more stimulating options, such as wine, honey, and herbs. He received over 2,000 enemas throughout his life without regard to time or place. Doctors were also advised to use bloodletting to treat diseases, typically performed with knives or leeches. If you recovered, it was credited to the barber's expertise. If you died from blood loss, it was seen as a sign of your grave sins, and you needed to repent to God. The barbers would dump the blood into the Thames River. Just imagine the smell of that water. By the 18th century, this practice gained even more popularity, and many people, including Charles II, Louis XV, Queen Anne, and even Mozart, met their demise due to these methods.
No wonder women in the 19th century were obsessed with crinoline skirts. If you needed to use the bathroom, there was no need to wait in line. You could simply lift your skirt and slide a chamber pot underneath. Crinoline skirts were supported by massive frames, usually spanning 2 to 5 meters in diameter, with the most extravagant ones reaching up to 9 meters. As wide as a bus, however. The lack of a proper sewage system at the time made wearing these skirts risky. In London, all waste was dumped into the Thames or left on the streets. Walking around in such skirts often meant picking up bacteria from diseases like malaria and tuberculosis, putting entire families at risk. Candlelit homes also posed a significant hazard. Between 1850 and 1860, it is estimated that 3,000 women died after their crinoline skirts caught fire. In response to these dangers, people abandoned wide skirts and turned to hobble skirts, which were tightly fitted at the legs. Designers claimed these skirts made women resemble elegant mermaids, but their restrictive nature led to numerous accidents, including traffic incidents into the hazards. Green skirts dyed with arsenic-based pigments were highly toxic. Over time, women who wore them began experiencing headaches and developing sores on their hands and feet. It wasn't until World War I that society began to recognize women's broader capabilities. Only then did pants become a popular alternative, freeing women from the deadly restrictions of skirts.